You are here to turn the FBI into a personal Gestapo. You are a clear and present danger to democracy itself. Those words from Jill Biden just destroyed her own career. She thought comparing the FBI director to the Gestapo on live television would make her an education reform hero. His response: he calmly opened an FBI case file with her name on it. What happened next was the most brutal, systematic destruction in congressional history. The House Judiciary Committee hearing room in Washington, D.C. buzzed with the kind of electric tension that only comes from high-stakes political drama. Rows of polished wooden desks stretched across the chamber filled with lawmakers from both sides of the aisle, their faces a mix of curiosity and calculation. Reporters crammed into the back laptops, open fingers hovering over keyboards ready to capture every whisper and gesture. Cameras from major networks beamed the scene live to millions across the country, turning what was billed as a routine oversight session into a potential spectacle. At the witness table sat Kash Patel, the newly appointed director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Tall and composed with a sharp suit that spoke of quiet authority, Patel embodied the steady hand of federal law enforcement. As the ninth director in the FBI's storied history, he had already earned a reputation for his unwavering commitment to impartial justice, drawing on years of service in national security roles to lead the agency with precision and integrity. Flanked by a pair of FBI legal advisors and a stack of sealed folders bearing the Bureau's official stamps, Patel adjusted his notes calmly, his expression betraying no hint of the storm about to break. The hearing, titled FBI Leadership Priorities and Reform Under New Direction, was meant to probe the agency's future under Patel's guidance. Republicans on the committee saw it as a chance to highlight his vision for restoring public trust in law enforcement. Democrats, however, had other plans. They had pushed for the session, hoping to grill the director on perceived shifts in agency priorities, framing it as a defense of democratic institutions. Whispers in the hallways suggested it would be a chance for pointed questions on civil liberties and oversight. But no one anticipated the fireworks from Jill Biden. Seated prominently among the invited witnesses and advocates, the former First Lady had been invited to speak on the intersections of education policy and federal enforcement. Known for her lifelong advocacy in education, from community college initiatives to children's literacy programs, she carried an aura of moral authority that had long shielded her from scrutiny. Her team had prepped meticulously, scripting a moment that would resonate on social media and cable news alike. Jill Biden, with her poised demeanor and sharp intellect, was ready to seize the spotlight. Committee Chairman Jim Jordan rapped his gavel, calling the room to order. The air hummed with the low murmur of side conversations as he launched into his opening remarks, praising Patel's early efforts to streamline investigations and bolster community outreach. Jordan was midway through when a hand shot up from the witness section with deliberate urgency. Jill Biden stood, her navy blue suit impeccable, a single strand of pearls catching the light from the overhead fixtures. She held a folder of her own edges, crisp and annotated. "Mr. Chairman," she interjected, her voice clear and commanding, carrying the practiced poise of someone who had addressed crowds from the White House Rose Garden to university commencement stages. "I must raise a point of personal privilege before we proceed any further. This cannot wait." Jordan paused. Eyebrow arched in mild surprise, but nodded. "The floor is yours, Dr. Biden." Jill Biden did not sit. She stepped forward slightly, her gaze locking onto Patel like a prosecutor eyeing a suspect. The room fell into a hush, every eye drawn to her. "Mr. Chairman, esteemed members of the committee, and Director Patel," she began, her tone laced with the righteous indignation that had defined her public persona. "We gather today not merely for routine oversight, but to confront a profound crisis in our nation's soul. The man sitting before us," she gestured sharply toward Patel, represents a grave peril to the very foundations of American democracy. A ripple of murmurs spread through the chamber. Reporters leaned in, sensing the pivot from policy talk to personal assault. Jill Biden pressed on, her voice rising with controlled fervor. "Director Patel, you have no place at the helm of the FBI. Your tenure signals the utter politicization of our federal law enforcement apparatus. You are not here to uphold justice for all Americans. You are here to weaponize the Bureau against perceived enemies, to silence dissent, and to erode the checks and balances that protect our freedoms." She paused for effect, letting the words hang. "You are turning the FBI into a personal Gestapo, a tool of intimidation rather than investigation. How can we trust an agency led by someone who prioritizes agendas over accountability? You are a clear and present danger to democracy itself." The accusation landed like a thunderclap. Gasps echoed from the Democratic side, while Republicans shifted uncomfortably, exchanging glances. Live feeds exploded on social media hashtags like #Patel Gestapo and #Defend. Democracy trended instantly. Jill Biden's communications team, monitoring from a nearby war room, fired off pre-drafted posts, amplifying the moment. This was gold, they thought, a viral clip that would rally her base and paint Patel as the villain in the ongoing narrative of institutional decay. Jill Biden stood tall, chin lifted, savoring the silence that followed. She had timed it perfectly, interrupting before Patel could even deliver his opening statement. In her mind, this was her defining stand, the educator warrior calling out corruption, echoing the themes of resilience and reform that had marked her career. Cameras zoomed in on her face, capturing the steely resolve that had won her admiration from educators and activists alike. Kash Patel did not flinch. For a full 3 seconds he sat motionless, his dark eyes fixed on Jill Biden with the unyielding calm of a seasoned investigator who had stared down far worse than political theater. Those in the room who knew his background from national security briefings recognized the look immediately, the quiet intensity of a man who had built cases on facts, not flair. When he finally spoke, his voice was even resonant, cutting through the tension like a scalpel. "Dr. Biden," he said, addressing her formally, with a nod that carried no deference, only professionalism. "I appreciate your passionate defense of democratic principles. In fact, it is precisely that commitment to transparency and accountability that brings me here today, prepared to address the very issues you raise." He reached into the briefcase at his side with deliberate slowness, withdrawing a thick red-bordered folder stamped with the FBI's classification markings, "Eyes Only, Highly Restricted." Perhaps before we delve into hypotheticals about the Bureau's direction, we should examine some concrete examples of accountability right here in this room. He lifted the folder just high enough for the cameras to catch the bold lettering on the tab. "Biden Jill Tracy, Financial Irregularities Investigation, Active Case File." The room erupted in a collective intake of breath. Jill Biden's composed facade cracked for the briefest instant, her eyes widening as recognition dawned. But she recovered swiftly, forcing a tight smile that did not reach her eyes. "This is absurd, Director Patel," she shot back, her voice steady but edged with urgency. "You dare to use this platform to launch personal attacks. This is the very weaponization you claim to oppose. Members of the committee, this is an outrage, a blatant attempt to intimidate a public servant who dares to speak truth to power." Patel ignored the interruption, his demeanor as steady as a metronome. "As director, I have a duty to ensure the FBI operates with integrity, investigating leads wherever they may lead, regardless of position or prominence. And these files," he tapped the folder, "lightly contain leads that warrant the American people's attention. Our Financial Crimes Unit has been reviewing patterns in charitable and educational funding streams for some time now. What they uncovered in your associated entities is illuminating. Jill Biden leaned forward, her hands gripping the edge of the table. Director, those are private matters protected by law. You cannot simply waive classified documents in a public hearing like some cheap courtroom drama. This violates every norm of due process. A few Democratic members nodded in agreement, murmuring about procedural violations. Chairman Jordan rapped his gavel lightly. Order, please. Director Patel, the committee yields to you for clarification. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Patel opened the folder with the precision of a surgeon, revealing neatly tabbed sections filled with charts, bank statements, and forensic summaries. Let me be clear. This investigation predates my tenure, initiated under standard protocols by career agents, following up on suspicious activity reports from major financial institutions. Dr. Biden, between the years in question, your affiliated educational foundations reported a net asset growth of over $2 million. Yet our forensic accountants identified discrepancies approximately $350,000 in unreported transfers from donor funds to personal consulting entities structured in ways that raised red flags under federal banking regulations. The specifics hit like a gut punch. Jill Biden's face paled slightly, but she fired back. Those are legitimate administrative fees for program development. Every nonprofit faces scrutiny. It's how the system works to ensure transparency. Patel nodded as if acknowledging a fair point, then slid a single sheet across the table toward the committee, a declassified excerpt for the record. Legitimate or not, these transactions triggered 17 separate SARs, suspicious activity reports, from banks like J.P. Morgan Chase and Bank of America. Patterns of structuring below reporting thresholds routed through layered LLCs tied to family members. He paused, letting the implications sink in. This is not conjecture, Dr. Biden. This is the result of subpoenas, wire reviews, and collaboration with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division. The room was pin-drop silent, now the earlier murmurs replaced by the scratch of pens on notepads. Reporters typed furiously headlines forming in real-time FBI director exposes Biden finances in shocking hearing twist. Jill Biden's allies on the committee exchanged uneasy glances. This was no longer about scoring points against Patel. It was personal, and the evidence appeared airtight. Jill Biden straightened, summoning her inner steel. Mr. Chairman, I demand this line of questioning cease immediately. If there are legitimate concerns, they should be handled through proper channels, not this public spectacle. This is an assault on privacy and a misuse of federal power. Jordan leaned into his microphone. Noted for the record, Dr. Biden. But the director is within his rights to respond to relevance. Proceed, Director. Patel closed the folder momentarily, his eyes meeting hers with unflinching resolve. Privacy is a right we all cherish, but when federal funds and charitable donations are involved, transparency is not optional. And Dr. Biden, what we have here suggests a pattern that extends far beyond accounting errors. He reopened the file, flipping to a section marked Educational Grant Diversion. For instance, grants intended for community college outreach programs were redirected through a series of consulting agreements to entities with no documented educational output. Over $200,000 funneled to offshore accounts for what appears to be personal real estate acquisitions. Outrage rippled through the audience. A Democratic staffer whispered urgently into a lawmaker's ear. Jill Biden slammed her folder shut. This is defamation, pure and simple. You are twisting facts to fit a narrative. I have spent my life building opportunities for underserved communities. How dare you impugn that? Patel's response was measured, almost gentle in its firmness. I am not here to impugn service, Dr. Biden. I am here to present facts. And these facts include email trails from your foundation's board approving transfers with minimal oversight. He projected a redacted screenshot onto the committee screen, a chain of messages outlining the diversions, timestamps glaring. The American taxpayer deserves to know if their contributions to education are reaching classrooms or vacation homes. Jill Biden sat down heavily, her mind racing. Her legal team in the gallery was already on phone's damage control in motion. This was supposed to be her triumph, a viral takedown of the new guard at the FBI. Instead, it was unraveling into something far more dangerous, an exposure that could unravel years of carefully curated legacy. As the committee recessed briefly for consultation, Patel gathered his notes, his expression unchanged. The power in the room had shifted irrevocably. What began as an ambush had become an interrogation, and Kash Patel, with his quiet command of the evidence, held all the cards. Whispers among the lawmakers turned to the folders still unopened on his table. Hints of deeper probes into international ties and crisis exploitation. The hearing was just getting started, and the real revelations were yet to come. The break ended too soon for Jill Biden. As the gavel fell again, she steeled herself, determined to reclaim the narrative. But deep down, a knot of dread formed. Patel had only scratched the surface, and the folders before him promised a reckoning that no amount of advocacy could deflect. The gavel cracked like a starter pistol, signaling the end of the brief recess. The House Judiciary Committee hearing room felt smaller now, the air thicker with unspoken accusations and the faint scent of coffee from styrofoam cups scattered on side tables. Lawmakers settled back into their seats, eyes darting between the witness table and the gallery where Jill Biden's legal team huddled in urgent conference. Cameras adjusted their angles, capturing the subtle shifts, a Republican congressman leaning forward with keen interest, a Democratic aide scrolling furiously through notes on a tablet. The live stream viewer count had spiked into the millions, chat feeds ablaze with speculation. What started as policy oversight had morphed into a live-wire confrontation, and the nation was glued. Kash Patel remained the picture of composure at the witness table, his stack of folders arranged with military precision. He had used the break to sip water and review his outline not out of nerves, but to ensure every revelation landed with the weight it deserved. As director of the FBI, Patel's guiding principle was simple facts over frenzy justice without favoritism. His career in federal service had honed that edge-turning complex webs of evidence into airtight cases that stood up in the harshest scrutiny. Now, facing a room full of skeptics and spectators, he prepared to peel back the first layer of what promised to be a labyrinthine exposé. Chairman Jim Jordan cleared his throat into the microphone. The committee will reconvene. Director Patel, you have the floor to continue your response to Dr. Biden's concerns.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Patel nodded graciously, his voice steady and resonant, carrying the quiet authority that had commanded respect in countless briefings. He turned his gaze back to Jill Biden, who had reclaimed her seat, but sat ramrod straight, her fingers interlaced tightly on the table before her. Dr. Biden, your call for accountability is one I share. The FBI exists to protect the integrity of our institutions, including those in education and philanthropy where public trust is paramount. To that end, allow me to elaborate on the financial patterns our investigators uncovered in your affiliated organizations. He opened the red-bordered folder once more, this time extracting a glossy binder of charts and summaries declassified for the committee's eyes only. Projected onto the large screen behind him, the visuals sprang to life flow charts, tracing money trails like veins in a hidden organ,
timelines marked with transaction dates and bar graphs spiking with unreported inflows. The room leaned in collectively as Patel began his pointer tracing the lines with surgical accuracy. Our Financial Crimes section, in coordination with the IRS Criminal Investigation Division, launched this probe following a routine audit of federal grant allocations to educational nonprofits. What emerged was not isolated oversight lapses, but a sophisticated network designed to obscure the flow of charitable funds. Specifically, the Jill Biden Family Education Foundation and two affiliated LLCs, Horizon Learning Consultants and Global Outreach Initiatives, served as conduits for over $1.2 million in donations between the relevant period. Jill Biden interjected sharply, her voice slicing through the narration. Director Patel, those entities are transparent nonprofits dedicated to literacy programs for underserved youth. Every dollar is accounted for in public filings. This is a fishing expedition, nothing more. Patel did not break stride, his expression one of patient elucidation rather than confrontation. Transparency is indeed the goal, Dr. Biden, which is why we subpoenaed those filings alongside bank records from Wells Fargo Citibank and an offshore entity in the Cayman Islands. The discrepancies are stark. He advanced the slide, highlighting a cluster of transactions in red. Donations earmarked for community college scholarships totaling $450,000 from major corporate philanthropies were routed through Horizon Learning Consultants. From there, $320,000 was disbursed as consulting fees to family-linked entities with no corresponding deliverables. No lesson plans, no program evaluations, no student impact reports. Instead, those funds appear in property deeds for a Delaware beachfront condo and renovations to a personal residence in Pennsylvania. Murmurs swelled into a low rumble. A Democratic committee member, Representative Jamie Raskin, raised a hand. Mr. Chairman, point of order. Are we now litigating private real estate in a federal oversight hearing? Jordan fielded it smoothly. Overruled for now, Mr. Raskin. The director is addressing relevance to FBI priorities. Proceed. Patel inclined his head in acknowledgement. Precisely, Congressman. These are not private matters when they involve diversion of tax-exempt funds intended for public good. Our forensic accountants employed advanced tracing software, similar to that used in major fraud cases, to map the layering. Funds entered as clean donations then cycled through shell structures of 501c3 to an LLC, then to a family trust, and finally to personal accounts. This structuring evaded the $10,000 reporting threshold under the Bank Secrecy Act a staggering 28 times. He paused to let the number resonate, then cued the next exhibit, a timeline of wire transfers each annotated with SAR notations from the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network. FinCEN flagged these as high risk due to the velocity and volume, rapid in fragmented out. One particularly illustrative transfer, $75,000 from a foundation gala, reclassified as media production costs, but traced to payments for luxury travel and event planning unrelated to any educational outreach. Jill Biden's cheeks flushed, but she rallied with the poise of someone accustomed to the podium. Those were legitimate expenses for advocacy events. Book tours, promoting children's reading partnerships with publishers. You're conflating routine operations with criminality. I demand my counsel be allowed to respond. Her attorney, a silver-haired veteran of white-collar defenses, rose from the gallery and approached the table, briefcase in hand. Director, with respect, these allegations tread perilously close to defamation. My client has dedicated decades to public service. If there's a case, file it in court, not this circus. Patel met the lawyer's gaze evenly, his tone respectful yet unyielding. Counsel, I assure you, this is no circus. This is congressional oversight at its most vital. shining light on potential abuses that undermine the very causes Dr. Biden champions. And to address your point, the evidence speaks for itself. He signaled to an FBI technician offstage who connected a secure laptop to the AV system. To illustrate the intent behind these movements, we have court-authorized surveillance recordings from a joint operation with the U.S. Attorney's Office. The screen flickered to life, displaying a waveform of audio time-stamped and certified. Jill Biden's eyes narrowed, a flicker of unease crossing her features. "What is this?" she demanded, half rising from her seat. "A routine wiretap under Title III targeting financial fraud patterns in nonprofit sectors," Patel explained matter-of-factly, "obtained with probable cause from a federal judge. This intercept from a conference call involving foundation principals captures discussions on fund allocation." He pressed play, and the room filled with voices, clear professional but laced with the casual pragmatism of backroom dealings. The lead voice, identified in subtitles as Jill Biden, spoke first. "We need to keep the donor streams clean but flexible. Route the bulk through Horizon's consulting arm. Call it program development. The beach house closing is next month. We can offset it as outreach venue scouting." A male voice, her financial advisor, turned the caption, "Jill, that's tight. Structuring under 10 grand per wire avoids the flags, but if audited, well, make sure it looks educational," she replied, a light laugh underscoring the words. "Tie it to a literacy workshop, virtual, low cost. The Foundation's board approves anything with kids in the title." The recording cut off at Patel's gesture, leaving a stunned hush. The specificity, names, amounts, rationalizations, hung in the air like smoke from a fired gun. Jill Biden sank back, her face a mask of controlled fury. That was taken out of context. A hypothetical discussion, nothing executed. Patel shook his head slightly, advancing to a reconciliation slide. "Hypotheticals do not reconcile with executed transfers, Dr. Biden. The very beach house deed purchased weeks later lists the foundation as partial financier. Our investigators cross-referenced with Delaware property records and IRS Form 990s revealing underreported personal benefits exceeding $150,000 annually." Representative Raskin tried again, his voice tight. "Mr. Chairman, this veers into character assassination. The committee should recess for legal review." Denied Jordan ruled firmly. "The public has a right to this transparency, especially when federal grants are implicated." Patel pressed on his delivery, methodical, building the case brick by unassailable brick. This pattern extends to campaign-adjacent contributions. While not direct violations of FEC rules, the funneling through educational proxies, skirted disclosure requirements, inflating reported philanthropy while masking personal gains. Total diversions, $620,000 per hour reconstruction. But the true scope elevates this beyond mere mismanagement. He continued, his voice taking on a grave timbre. The Financial Crimes section has classified these activities under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act, RICO. What we see is not a lone actor, but an enterprise, interconnected entities, repeated predicate acts of wire fraud and money laundering orchestrated to convert public-spirited funds into private wealth. The word enterprise sent a chill through the room. RICO was the FBI's heavy artillery for mob bosses and cartel kingpins, not esteemed educators. Jill Biden's attorney leaned in, whispering furiously, but she waved him off, her eyes locked on Patel. "You're painting me as a racketeer for promoting reading programs. This is McCarthyism in a suit." Patel responded with quiet steel. "No, Dr. Biden. This is law enforcement following the evidence. RICO requires an ongoing organization and a pattern of racketeering. Wire fraud via interstate transfers, mail fraud in falsified filings, all documented in 42 instances across 3 years. He displayed an organizational chart, nodes, for the Foundation LLC's family trusts, linked by arrows of fund flows. At the center, principals, including yourself, board members and advisors, forming a closed loop of influence and benefit. The chart was a damning visual colors coding legal versus illicit paths, with red dominating. Committee members from both parties pored over printed handouts, the bipartisan gravity sinking in. Even skeptics could not deny the technical rigor. Subpoenas cited judges named ledgers balanced to the penny. As the clock ticked towards the hearing's natural break, Patel closed the binder with a soft thud. This financial web, Dr. Biden, touches every pillar of public trust education, charity governance. But as our investigation deepened, we uncovered threads leading beyond domestic borders to foreign influences that demand even greater scrutiny. Jill Biden seized the momentary lull, her voice rising in a final salvo. Lies and distortions. I will sue for every slanderous word. This ends now. The American people see through your tactics. Patel met her fire with calm finality. The American people deserve the full picture, Dr. Biden. And to that end, I can confirm that a federal grand jury in the District of Columbia has been impaneled reviewing this evidence for indictment. Proceedings are active and sealed. The announcement landed like a gavel of its own. Gasps rippled. Phones buzzed with urgent texts to editors and insiders. A grand jury meant charges were not hypothetical. They were imminent. Jill Biden's defiance cracked her shoulders, slumping as the weight of federal machinery bore down. Her team swarmed the table papers, rustling in frantic strategy. Chairman Jordan adjourned for the day, but the damage was done. What had begun as a bold accusation had spiraled into a meticulously dismantled facade, with Kash Patel at the helm, steering the ship of justice with unwavering resolve. As the room emptied, whispers turned to the promise of tomorrow's session. International ties, shadowy donors, and the full unraveling of an influence that reached far beyond U.S. shores. The reckoning was only beginning. As the recess dragged into an extended deliberation, the hearing room emptied in waves, leaving behind the echo of heated debates and the faint rustle of discarded briefing papers. Outside, the fog had lifted, revealing a crisp blue sky that belied the storm raging within the Capitol's walls. Kash Patel lingered at the witness table, methodically organizing his exhibits under the watchful eye of his security detail. He exchanged quiet words with Chairman Jordan, outlining the path forward without a trace of triumphalism. Only the steady resolve of a man committed to the rule of law. For Patel, this was not about personal vindication. It was about restoring the FBI's mantle as an impartial guardian, free from the shadows of influence that had crept into too many corners of public life. In a nearby anteroom, Jill Biden's inner circle convened in crisis mode. Her attorney paced phone pressed to his ear, coordinating with constitutional experts and PR firms. Aides scrolled through incoming threats of lawsuits and media spins, while Jill herself sat, composed but hollow-eyed, sipping water from a paper cup. The recordings, the charts, they were not mere allegations, but artifacts of a life under microscope, threads pulling at the seams of her carefully woven narrative. We pivot to the human story, her chief advisor urged. Education advocate under siege. The public loves a fighter. But even as they plotted, doubt flickered. The evidence was too granular, too relentless. The gavel reconvened the session amid a fuller house, spectators spilling into overflow areas. Tensions simmered higher, with lawmakers invoking points of order like shields. Jordan yielded the floor back to Patel, who rose with the same unhurried grace. To conclude this segment on external influences, He began, his voice cutting through the hum. We turn to the broader implications for national policy. Dr. Biden, your advocacy shaped federal education guidelines during key legislative pushes. Yet our counterintelligence review links those efforts to donor directives that prioritized foreign economic interests over American priorities. The screen refreshed with declassified policy memos, side-by-side comparisons of Biden-endorsed bills and foreign white papers. Patel traced the parallels with a steady hand. Provisions for international student exchanges, embedded in the last major Education Act, echoed language from the Donor Alliance's strategic playbook, easing data flows that our analysts flagged as vectors for intellectual property risks. Over $500,000 in related grants funneled through your initiatives, unregistered and unvetted. Jill Biden, emboldened by the recess, leaned into her mic. Director Education is global by nature. Collaborating with international partners strengthens America, doesn't weaken it. You're conflating generosity with guilt. Patel nodded, acknowledging without conceding. Collaboration, yes. But when it veers into advocacy for specific foreign agendas, as evidenced by email chains coordinating lobby days with donor reps, it triggers FARA. We've documented 19 such instances, including travel itineraries reimbursed under the guise of fact-finding trips. He projected redacted itineraries, luxury stays in allied capitals, meetings logged as cultural exchanges, but time-stamped with policy briefings. Her attorney interjected again, voice rising. These are protected under the speech or debate clause if tied to legislative work. Debate fosters policy, Counsel Patel replied evenly, but not when subsidized by undisclosed principles. The Supreme Court has ruled on this transparency or registration. Neither occurred here. The committee stirred as Patel segued to the exploitation angle, his tone darkening slightly with the gravity of the charges. Compounding these violations was the strategic use of domestic crises to amplify your platform, and the donor networks. Our digital forensics lab dissected communications during economic shocks and health emergencies, revealing a playbook of timed narratives. Clips played curated social media storms, press hits, synchronized with grant announcements. Your teams rejected expedited federal aid channels 12 times per logs, opting instead for high-visibility appeals that netted $800,000 in private funds that cycled back into the enterprise. Video analysis shows 15 segments where responses were prepped in advance, actors coached for emotional impact. Jill Biden's voice trembled with indignation. Prepped. I lived those crises. Counseled families, pushed for relief. This reduces compassion to conspiracy. Compassion, unchecked, becomes opportunism. Patel countered gently but firmly. When metadata ties posts to donor satisfaction reports, impact metrics exceed projections. It suggests more than empathy. The FBI views this as a pattern crisis, as catalyst for influence, peddling eroding trust in public servants. Representative Raskin flushed, demanded enough. This hearing has devolved into prosecution. Mr. Chairman, I move for adjournment. Jordan polled the room, the vote splitting narrowly against. Motion fails. Director, wrap your remarks. Patel complied, closing the folder with finality. These shadows, financial, foreign, exploitative, dim the light of genuine service. The FBI commits to full illumination, referring all to prosecutors. No one, regardless of legacy, stands above accountability. As the session dissolved into chaos, shouts, gavels, rushing aides, Jill Biden exited, flanked by security, her stride unbroken, but her aura fractured. Kash Patel remained seated, fielding questions with poise, the unyielding anchor in the tempest. The finale awaited justice, served lessons etched. In the corridors of power, the light of truth had begun to pierce the veil. The final day of the House Judiciary Committee hearing unfolded under a weight of inevitability, the chamber charged with the gravity of a courtroom at verdict. The air buzzed with whispered strategies and the click of keyboards as reporters, lawmakers, and aides braced for the culmination of Kash Patel's methodical dismantling of Jill Biden's public persona. The live stream numbers soared past previous records, millions tuning in for what promised to be a historic reckoning. Outside Capitol Hill swelled with demonstrators, some chanting for justice, others decrying overreach, while the nation watched, polarized, yet captivated. Kash Patel sat at the witness table, his demeanor as steady as ever, the folders before him now a symbol of unyielding accountability. As FBI director, his mission was singular: to uphold the law with impartial precision, letting evidence speak louder than rhetoric. The prior days had exposed a web of financial deceit and foreign influence. Now the consequences would crystallize alongside a broader lesson for a watching America. Chairman Jim Jordan gavelled the session to order, his voice firm. We resume to conclude oversight of FBI priorities. Director Patel, you have the floor. Patel rose briefly, nodding to the committee. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The evidence presented: financial crimes, unregistered foreign advocacy, and crisis exploitation paints a clear picture of systemic betrayal of public trust.
Today, we outline the FBI's actions and the principles at stake. He opened his final folder marked with DOJ and IRS seals, signaling the endgame of a multi-agency probe. First criminal referrals have been filed with the Department of Justice. Prosecutors in the District of Columbia are preparing indictments on charges of wire fraud, money laundering, RICO violations, and FARA breaches. Total illicit gains, $1.4 million, are subject to asset forfeiture, with marshals seizing accounts and properties tied to the enterprise. He displayed a seizure notice listing a Delaware condo and offshore holdings. Jill Biden, seated with her attorney, remained silent, her face pale but composed. Her team had shifted to legal defense, filing motions to suppress evidence, but the public tide had turned. Patel continued, Second, we've revoked all access to federal systems for implicated parties, citing national security risks from foreign coordination. Third, the FBI is expanding its probe, codenamed Beacon Watch, to examine similar patterns in other advocacy networks. The room stirred as he turned to the broader impact. This case transcends one individual. It's a warning: no legacy, no platform shields corruption. The American people entrusted Dr. Biden with a voice for education. That trust was leveraged for personal gain and external agendas. He paused, eyes sweeping the committee. But from this, we learn. Leadership demands transparency, open books, clear motives. When public service becomes a mask for profit, democracy frays. Representative Raskin, subdued, spoke softly. Director, you've made your point. But what's to stop this from becoming a weapon against dissent? Patel met his gaze. Evidence, Congressman. The FBI wields facts, not vendettas. Every warrant, every wiretap here was court-approved. Accountability isn't persecution, it's protection. He turned to the cameras. To the public, demand leaders who serve you, not themselves. Report discrepancies, support oversight, and uphold the law's equality. The gavel fell, closing the hearing. Within days, indictments dropped, freezing Biden's assets and ending her public career. Patel emerged as a beacon of integrity, his evidence-driven approach restoring faith in justice. The lesson echoed: corruption falters under scrutiny,
and civic duty, rooted in truth, rebuilds trust. America watching was called to vigilance to ensure no one stands above the law.